Welcome to this episode of History Hunters. I'm here at the East Union Cemetery. Dates back to the 1870s here in Manteca, California. It's a city in San Joaquin County in the Central Valley of California. And I'm here to talk about and visit the graves of some historical people, some interesting because of the way they passed away. Wait till you hear some of the stories on this episode. Check it out, you can adopt a palm tree in the cemetery. And there's a number of them.
Manteca's East Union Cemetery was founded in 1872, at a time when this was quite a rural landscape. In time, urban sprawl of Manteca put a modern convenience store across the street, and roaring traffic sounds now shatter the once tranquil first grave dug here, that of Adeline Reynolds. She was 53 years old when she died 3 days after Christmas in 1872. In time, other persons who died before Reynolds, but buried at different locations, were relocated here by family members.
This one grabs my eye. It looks like one of those old-fashioned grave markers. Here lies the body of John Oldham Smith. He was born in Longford, England, 1804. Look at that. Came to California 1849. He died 1875. He was an honest man and a worthy pioneer. You have to really enjoy the fonts on this one. Annie, wife of J.W. Wilkinson, maybe they misspelled it. She died in 1882. And right here is one of the first graves I want to find. It's that of the first deputy sheriff of San Joaquin County. It was Annie Delaney Jack Reynolds. She died in 1971. She was born March 9th, 1884. She led a pretty adventurous life before she was appointed San Joaquin County's first woman deputy sheriff. She was born in French Camp, the oldest settlement in San Joaquin County. She was basically a tomboy. She grew up in a time when people were much more self-reliant than they are today. She was pretty good at riding horses. Now, one incident that probably spurred her on to be interested in law enforcement, Annie told of a time in 1890 when, 6 years old, she and her little brother were driving the family buckboard from French Camp to Stockton, a distance of about 6 miles. And then they came upon a stagecoach robbery. They saw a masked gunman spring up from the brush on the side of the road shouting, "Stand and deliver." The bandit then robbed passengers, their money and valuables. Now they were terrified. Annie and her brother kind of hid in the tall grass and watched the gunman run across the field and watched him take refuge behind a nearby barn. As soon as it was safe, she climbed back on the buckboard with her brother, continued into Stockton, and they found Sheriff Cunningham to report the crime. With little fanfare, Annie was sworn into San Joaquin County's first woman deputy sheriff by Sheriff William Reeks, January 21st, 1927. Annie married this guy, William Reynolds, in 1905, and they settled in a 13-room house on Elm Street in French Camp. The local newspaper quoted her as saying, "I toted a .45 caliber Bisbee single action revolver and was pretty good with it." So that's quite an accomplishment. You think about it, about 100 years ago, there's a woman sheriff in this county here in the Central Valley of California. I'm going to go over here and find the grave of a county supervisor who, I guess, ran into such business trouble that he decided to shoot himself twice in the chest and stagger and talk about it. This is the grave I was looking for. County supervisor by the name of Henry B. Knight. He lived out in Lathrop on a farm, and I guess he had so much trouble with business and other personal matters that he decided he was going to kill himself. On July 25th, 1907, he leveled a gun at his chest, took a shot. One of the ranch hands saw him take a second shot. Then he continued to live, poor guy, and he staggered. He didn't fall, but he walked 20 yards and fell. The newspaper said he fell with a shout significant of great joy, so I'm not sure if maybe he was entering heaven or at that point. It said the unfortunate man was still alive when his daughter came to him some minutes later. Knight was one of the prominent ranchers of the county, and he left a large and sizable and very valuable estate. Now, I don't know anything about this gentleman right here, but I thought his name was pretty cool, and so is his marker. Glendower Price Salmon, born in 1832, and he died in 1894. But look at that, isn't that cool? I mean, they put so much effort into these. Right here is the Bradley plot, and I wanted to focus on the grave of this gentleman right here. John W. Bradley lived from 1846 to 1909. He is among the 16 Civil War veterans that are buried in this cemetery. Someone declared that he was an Indian scout for General George Custer, but I question that because Custer did have a Lieutenant James J. Bradley, who was a scout who was the first to view the slaughter at Little Bighorn. So I wonder if somebody is just confusing the two Bradleys. But I'm not discounting the fact that this guy could have been a scout for George Custer. Here's another of the Civil War graves. They put these metal plaques on here to signify that they served in the Civil War. This is Oliver Crawford's grave. He was Company H of the 10th West Virginia Infantry. I'm always excited to find one more Civil War grave. Corporal John Q. Adams Patterson, Company G of the Iowa Infantry. Civil War veteran. These above ground crypts are very interesting, I think. I'm not sure why people want to be buried above ground. As you can tell, it's a very busy street and it's very loud. But there we go with the farewell again. So this is who I wanted to find. Sarah Ann Harrell. She was born in Kentucky in 1807. So imagine she came pretty close to Abraham Lincoln. She died May 21st, 1902. Gone to meet those she loved. She was born in Danville, Lincoln County, Kentucky, and at the age of 10, her and her family moved to Kentucky, Warren County, Kentucky, where she met and married Elijah Harrelson. They went in 1837 at a Baptist church in Bowling Green. After getting married, they were on their way to Wisconsin on horseback. They left Grant County, Wisconsin in 1864 by covered wagon. They were among the first to settle here in San Joaquin, near Ripon. In 1865, Sarah and Elijah and their son William moved to their new ranch home on French Camp Road, spending there until their deaths. As you can see there, Elijah Harrelson was a native of North Carolina, 1800. At the bottom it says, "Ah, he is gone, whom we so dearly loved, whose tender kindness we so often proved. Oh yes, he's gone, his happy spirits fled." So the Harrelson crypt is right here, and right next to it I need to talk about this guy right here, Washington O. Lewis. He was not only a Civil War veteran, he was a veteran of the Mexican War. As you can see, he was 74 years old when he died in 1889. He was a native of Kentucky, also a Mason. This tall marker here belongs to Joshua Cowell. I understand he was the first mayor of Manteca from 1842 to 1925. This entrance to the cemetery was put here in 1920, and it has on each side of it a tablet listing the names of the families who came here and the date that they arrived. The Salmons, of course, I say a lot of them here, the Broadhursts, and then over here you also have a continuation of the list. Harrelson, Graves, Sanger, all the way down 1870s. Looks like a lot of the families came in 1850s. If you're not familiar with California, you probably don't know that, you know, the Sierra Nevadas drain into the valley, and then it drains into the San Joaquin River, and then the San Joaquin River drains out to the San Francisco Bay. And we have something here called the Delta, and there were a lot of sloughs, a lot of bridges. And as the barges and steamships that came up from San Francisco could actually come up all the way to Stockton, but I understand there were some bridges that had to be raised and lowered, and those were kind of governed by bridge tenders who would raise and lower the bridges. And one of the individuals that I'm looking for here today was a bridge tender. Unfortunately, he passed away when he was making his way on the ferry from Oakland to Stockton. He passed away on the ship. Benjamin Remington, born in 1862. He was the bridge tender at Lathrop, and he passed on the ferry April 24th, 1917. He was en route to Lathrop, California, and he must have been buried here with his parents. There's Benjamin Remington, born in 1828, and Sarah Remington, his mother. Now this headstone is probably one of the most interesting headstones here. This headstone and the body buried here were originally buried in the Yerba Buena Cemetery in San Francisco. And as the city grew, the city needed to build a new civic center, so they decided, hey, let's use the cemetery grounds. So they dug up all the bodies, except they forgot about Mr. Elijah Bora, who was a native of Kentucky and died just a day or two after he arrived in San Francisco. So Elijah was 18 years old. He decided to come out to California, like a lot of young men, and mine for gold. Of course, he boarded a sailing ship, and the method of that time was to cross across the Isthmus of Panama. It was about 80 miles. So you either went by wagon train or you walked, and of course that was a malaria-infested area. And so he got bit by a mosquito and fell really ill with malaria. As soon as he got to San Francisco, he passed away. It was a common practice back then to move the cemeteries to make way for a building, but Elijah was one of those forgotten. Then one day there was a man by the name of Frank Dunn. He was digging in his backyard on Market Street, and he hit a piece of marble. He began digging it up, and he found out it was a headstone, and the body of Elijah was buried, according to the newspapers, 10 to 12 feet deep. So he had apparently been lost in the shuffle, and I just do not know how he ended up in Manteca, California. But I just wonder if that little chip on top was the shovel Mr. Dunn hit back in whatever it was. Now Elijah is buried right over here, and right next to him is Stephen Broadhurst. He died in 1888. He was part of the first wagon train to come to California via the Sierra Crossing near the present-day town of Truckee, right after the ill-fated Donner Party. It's said that when he settled in Sacramento, he was the first guy to build the first wooden building. He was 62 years old. I want to talk about this guy too, because he was a pastor. Now it says that he died on Christmas Eve, 1883. He's 44 years old. 1883 could have been the year the marker was placed here, because he did not pass away here. He died in 1862. I have fought the good fight. I've kept the faith. I've finished my course. This was erected by his daughter, Lizzie. There's her hand pointing up towards heaven. John Meyer, 1866. He was just 37. I gotta say, I kind of like the saying on Emma Torbert's grave. Died in 1942, not asleep, just awakened in a better world. Man, if you didn't have any kind of faith, there's no hope. I spent some time finding this grave. It's of Peter Clapp. And check out that on top, Pioneer 1849. Yes, indeed. He came around the Horn of South America on a sailing ship to the goldfields in 1849. So he was one of the first out here. And judging by that nice marker there, who knows, he may have struck it rich, or he may have done what a lot of pioneers and gold seekers did back then. They settled down, farmed here in the valley, and made their fortune in agriculture. So if you're a faithful viewer of my channel, you probably have seen videos where I've talked about wooden headstones being kind of the marker that was for poor people. You know, if you were rich, you could afford a nice marble, granite, stone, giant stone. But the wooden headstones signified people who pretty much didn't have any money at the end of their life. There's actually one wooden headstone left in this cemetery. It's managed to withstand all the weathering for the years. So I don't know if he was buried after the fact or what, because supposedly we just showed you the first grave that wasn't that early. 1850, John O. Murphy, 1789 to 1850. Obviously that's a new marker. It said that he was a cattle driver from back east who came to California during the California Gold Rush and died of fever in Sonoma up north. So it was dangerous coming out to California. Sometimes I wonder if California is still a pretty dangerous place. Here's the grave of Joseph Mischler. He died April 13th, 1866 with typhoid fever after he was sick for 7 days. He was just 35 years old. He left behind a wife and numerous friends.
This grave represents a great tragedy, the drowning deaths of two young brothers, Clarence and Warren Cole. The marker inaccurately states that they died in 1910, but it was in June 1908 when the boys lost their lives in the Stanislaus River near Ripon. Apparently Warren, who was 20 years old, made a mad dash into the river and was swept away by the current. His 24-year-old brother Clarence, who could not swim, jumped in with his clothes on in an attempt to save his brother, but was also claimed by the water. The drowning deaths dominated local headlines for days since the bodies were not immediately recovered. The articles tell of the strange methods used to find the bodies, such as blasting dynamite in an attempt to displace the water and bring both bodies to the surface. Clarence's body was recovered first. A railroad engineer by the name of John Stewart had a strange idea, and that was to take socks once owned by Clarence, tie them to a wisp of straw, throw it into the river to watch where it would go downstream. When it was sucked below the surface, that's where they used grappling hooks to bring him up. Later found was Warren's body, which the paper reported had, quote, swollen to almost twice its natural size. Their devastated parents lived on and were buried here with their sons, Agnes in 1924 and Theodore in 1926.
Well, as you know, kids sometimes do the stupidest things. This is a sad story. It's Frank right here, Frank Gamblin. He and his friend decided they were going to climb to the top of a 68-foot tall electric tower. They're going to write their names up there. That was the purpose of going up there. Apparently didn't know that it was still energized with about 35,000 volts of electricity. And when he got within the top, apparently he touched the wire, he got zapped. And the report in the paper said that his body like burst into flames, so this blue ball of fire, and it shot 20 feet in the air, and he landed on the ground. He was smoking, he was badly burnt. Not only was he burnt, but he broke his neck. The only way they could put the flames out of the body was to throw sand on it. Frank Lee Gamblin, 1889 to 1908. So what does that make him, about 19 years old? It's sad that when you're in your prime, you're at your stupidest, pretty much. And that's just the way it is. I guess I'm a sucker for these cool headstones. Sarah Ann Salmon. Look at that. We'll meet again. I think they messed up the spelling of that one too. A little handshake. And look at that. She died less than a month after Abraham Lincoln did. It seems like whatever mode of transportation we come up with, there's hazards with it. Charles Hopper was born in 1855. He died in 1913. And the way that he died is he was thrown from his wagon and he never recovered from the time that he received his injuries. He was just 47 years old. This is definitely one of the graves I was looking for. It's that of David Rosenbaum, otherwise known as David Rosen. He was the owner of the Melrose Record Shop in San Francisco, and at one time he had working for him Maya Angelou, famous poet. She worked in that shop. Now, obviously he's Jewish. He lived from 1950 to 1997. He was part of the U.S. Army Air Corps. His wife of 39 years, Mercedes, she was also in the Army. He also founded the Jot Jazz Society in San Francisco. I believe, from what I read, that he suffered from Alzheimer's. So this is a grave that I really wanted to find. It was for a rancher by the name of Durwood F. Graves. He lived in Lathrop, and he died of injuries received when he was attacked by an angry bull while he was carrying lumber to make repairs to his corral. The bull rushed him, knocked him down, and rolled over him. The injured man tried to escape by crawling under a chicken shed and later into a crevice in the granary, but in both instances the vicious animal tore away the structures and continued the attack. Graves made an effort to beat off the animal with a pitchfork. A doctor was summoned, but the injured man was breathing his last breath when he arrived. He was 44 years old. I do thank you for getting to the end of this video. I do have a confession to make though. This took 2 visits, so if you see me wearing different clothing, it's because I showed up here on 2 different days. The first time that I came here was, I think, in February, but it was a lot cooler. Today it's one of the last days in April 2023, and it's one of the hottest days I've ever experienced. It's 94 degrees, so that's why you see me wearing short sleeve today. Hope that you appreciate learning a little bit more about how tough life was back then. And awfully short for a lot of folks. If you could leave us a comment, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you could subscribe to History Hunters and hit the notification bell, You won't miss any future episodes. And just for clarification, we try to upload videos every Sunday. Don't always stick to that schedule, but that's typically what we do. Thank you so much.